when the revolutionaries of Cuba attacked the Moncada garrison, and many of them were caught, killed, tortured. They were put on trial. That was a formal launching of the armed struggle in Cuba. The comrades, particularly, will be speaking, will talk about those experiences, because, comrades, Fidel Castro is not somebody ordinary to us in the South African Revolution. He's a very dear friend of the South African Revolution. I'm sure you have heard during the weeks some detractors trying to say Comrade Castro is a dictator. They do not say in 1959 there was a decision taken in Cuba to have the dictatorship of the proletariat. So all the people who represented capital were suppressed. Some of them left the country. So I think we'll have a debate in our ranks whether that is still relevant or not, but that's what happened. So it was the dictatorship of the majority against the minority who owned the means of production in Cuba. We will now have our leader, Comrade Nkosazana, who is a member of the ANC Women's League National Executive Committee and also the member of the ANC National Executive Committee, Comrade Nkosazana, who's also serving us in the African Union. Thank you very much.
Long live the spirit of Fidel Castro, long live. Long live the spirit of Fidel Castro, long live. Malibongwe. Comrades, from all the structures of our democratic, from all the structures of our alliance, starting with SANCO, with the SACP, with the COSATU, and ending with our Secretary General. And of course, Comrade Mahlobo sitting there, and the Youth League. Today, we are gathered here to bid farewell and to celebrate the life of an internationalist, of a towering revolutionary giant of our time, Comrade El Comandante Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, despite the fact that he was born in a comfortable family and was brought up in a comfortable upbringing, as soon as he got to university, immersed himself in liberation politics, in revolutionary politics, And as he was studying law, he started dedicating his life to the ideals of nationalism, anti-imperialism, to the ideals of internationalism. We are celebrating a life of a person, a revolutionary, who was not afraid to go to prison for his ideals, who mobilized, who at the age of 32 had successfully concluded and liberated the people of Cuba. How many of us at the age of 32 would have done that? He is a revolutionary and one of a kind. But he did not just dedicate himself to the freedom of the Cubans, but he dedicated himself to the freedom of Latin Americans, Africans, and other oppressed people of the world. Of course, as soon as they got into government, they were faced with numerous problems, but you can see that their focus in everything they did was for the betterment of their people. Whether it was the reforms that they introduced that opened more than 10,000 new schools and the literacy campaign that resulted in 98% literacy, which is the highest literacy in the world. It's a country whose health system is second to none, a country whose infant mortality is amongst the lowest, even lower than most of the developed world. And of course, Fidel Castro made sure that not only Cuba was free, but Africa and other countries. The Cubans contributed not by speeches, but by their blood to our liberation and to the liberation of many other countries in Africa. In fact, the canvas of our liberation is heavily woven together by the portraits of President Fidel Castro. You can see many portraits of him standing with young Agostinho Neto, discussing what to do about the defeat of Portuguese. You can see him with smiling Kwame Nkrumah. You can see him with attentive Julius Nyerere. You can see him with resilient Samora Machel. You can see him with pensive Oliver Tambo. You can see him with welcoming Nelson Mandela. You can see him with many of our liberators in our continent and elsewhere. Of course, as South Africa, and I'm sure the Secretary General will dwell on this, but we cannot forget that we are here in a democratic South Africa, in large measure because of the contribution of the Cubans, especially their contribution in training our people, but also in that decisive victory of Quito Cunaval. We are here to celebrate a comrade, a revolutionary who did not expect anything in return, but was happy when he could see people being free. When he came here in 1998, and when he addressed us in Parliament, he had this to say, I quote, that the Cuban forces fought together with African soldiers and officers on this continent for national independence and against foreign aggression. From the African land in which they worked and fought voluntarily and selflessly, they only took back to Cuba the remains of their fallen comrades and the honor of having fulfilled their duty. Close quote. Comrades, we are here celebrating the life of Fidel Castro, who was very instrumental in non-aligned movement, who was very instrumental in many other progressive organizations. And we'll remember that his Minister of Industry, Che Guevara, when he was at the UN, at the United Nations in Geneva, said South Africa violates the Charter of the United Nations by the inhumane and fascist policy of apartheid. He called on South Africa's expulsion from the UN. And of course, the Cubans participated in many of our struggles. But let me also say that Comrade Fidel understood that Cuba could not stand alone, strong as it may have been, 90 kilometers away from the United States that had an illegal blockade up to today. He understood that Cuba's destiny is intrinsically linked with Africa and other countries of the South's destiny and fortunes. The solidarity between the people of Cuba and Africa mirrors our intrinsic and communal African values of compassion, kindness, sharing, as President Castro said. I quote him again, "Our country is not just Cuba. Our country is also humanity." Close quote. So, President Fidel Castro not only was selfless, but he instilled that spirit of selflessness, that spirit of revolutionary into the Cuban people. And of course, he continued his commitment to Africa, even post-colonial times. He trained African doctors, engineers, and many other professionals. He sent thousands and thousands of Cuban doctors to more than 32 African countries. And we will recall that even in this country, between 1996 and 2002, Cuba sent 450 Cuban doctors and lecturers and deployed them to this country in order to assist us towards a better life for our people. And even as we speak today, there are thousands of African students studying in Cuba, including South African students, especially in the medical field. But we'll also remember that 2 years ago, when there was Ebola in 3 of the West African countries, Cuba, outside the continent, sent the biggest contingency of doctors and health workers to those countries. And to just illustrate the dedication of Cubans and Cuban doctors who went to fight Ebola, one of them contracted Ebola. He was evacuated out of West Africa for treatment. He was treated and he survived. And his family said he must come back home. He said, "No, I'm going back to fight Ebola until Ebola is conquered in West Africa." How many of us would have that kind of dedication? Only the Cubans would have that kind of dedication. And of course, as I'm speaking on behalf of the Women's League, I also want to say Fidel and the Cubans are amongst the high-ranking nations in the advancement of women. Women played a significant role in the Cuban history. Not only did many women fight in the revolution, but many also occupied leadership positions. Women such as Tete Pablo, Silas Sanchez, Melba, Hernandez, Vilma, and many others. The Cuban government has passed many laws and legal regulations ensuring the human rights of its people, but also of women. And a conscious effort has been made to push forward the equality for women. These laws include the protection of women's reproductive and sexual rights, the rights to family planning, health, education, and social security, the right to be assisted with housing, jobs, and the Cuban Constitution guarantees equal economic, social, and political rights for women. Before the revolution, only 12% of Cuban women were employed. But today, 60% of all Cuban professionals are women. Today, women in Cuba are 44% in the labor force, but 60% in the professionals. They are 66% in the technicians, mid-level professionals, and higher degree professionals. They are in the judiciary, they are in the teaching profession, they are in the Supreme Court, they are prosecutors, and they also have 36% of the seats in the National Assembly. As the progressive women of the world, we look to Cuba as an example of implementing policies and laws that protect and further women's rights and ensure social, political, and economic equality for women. Comrades, as we dip the flags of the Union of our African Union, member states, and South Africa as that member state, we must remember the legacy of service and internationalism left to us by President Castro for a, and I quote him, for a more generous, more jointly responsible, and more humane world. Indeed, his life was one dedicated to the equality of all races, ethnicities, sexes, and in his words, we must establish a new world order based on justice, on equality, and on peace. Of course, the colonial and imperial powers did not take kindly to his approach, to his revolutionary approach in Cuba. And they did many things, including sanctions, aggression. And his best defense to all the things they did to him was his people. And he is famously quoted as saying, if surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I would have won the gold medal. It is therefore important for us, men and women, and young South African and African revolutionaries, to learn from President Fidel Castro's great contribution to the struggles of the oppressed people of the world. We must use his teachings and revolutionary consciousness to inspire and guide us to strive for a better society and fight for the fulfillment of our generational mission, that of socio-economic freedom, a prosperous, peaceful, and integrated Africa driven by its citizens and playing a dynamic role in the global arena. The importance of Castro in the world history is monumental. We will not forget you, El Commandant. We will keep the spirit of your revolutionary ideas alive until all our struggles are won. We dip our revolutionary banners and mourn, at the same time celebrate with the people of Cuba and the world. And we are happy in the knowledge that he has joined the galaxy of our revolutionary heroes and heroines: Che Guevara, Vilma Espin, Simon Bolivar, Edward Mondlane, Martin Luther King, Thomas Sankara, Toussaint Louverture, Harry Kwala, Charlotte Maxeke, Pixley Gaseme, Governor Mbeki, Sisulu, Bram Fisher, Ho Chi Minh, Kwame Nkrumah, and many others. Lala ngoxolo qhawela maqhawe. Long live the spirit of Fidel Castro, long live. Long live the spirit of Fidel Castro, long live.
Utambo no Castro ma comanda, hai. Utambo no Castro ma comando. Oh Castro no tambo ma comando. Oh Castro no tambo ma comando. Oh ma comando, ma comando. Castro no tambo ma comando. Oh comando, ma comando. Ma comando, ma comando. Oh Castro no tambo ma kerela. Oh Cambo no Castro ma kerela. Oh Castro no tambo ma comando. 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 Ma comando. Ma comando. Amandla. Amandla. Comrades, you will all remember that before the Communist Party of Cuba was formed, all Comrade Raul and Comrade Fidel belonged to the July 26 movement, which was based in Mexico, and then it was based after the victory of the revolution in Havana. They entered into unity talks with the Communist Party of Cuba and formed the current Communist Party of Cuba. The July 26 movement, which Castro led, all of you will know, comrades, had leaders like Ernesto Che Guevara, who joined it in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, Camilo Cienfuegos, Almeida, Comrade Almeida Juan, all those comrades, both who were part of the July 26 movement. The July 26 movement inspired other movements in the world, but our movement obviously was already there. The African National Congress, the Communist Party of South Africa, later the South African Congress of Trade Unions. The ANC Women's League was founded, the ANC Youth League was there already. So we come from far, comrades, as a revolution and the people of Cuba. We will now request our leader, the leader of the veterans, to come and have a word. That they make Sisulu just to have a word on behalf of the ANC veterans. Kinaya khotso lelerat Angola, Angola, Angola. Kinaya khotso lelerat Cuba, Cuba. Kinaya khotso lelerat Cuba, Cuba, Cuba. Kinaya khotso lilirat Nicaragua, Nicaragua, Nicaragua. Kinaya khotso lilirat Nicaragua Kinaga ya khotso lilira Cuba, Cuba, Cuba Kinaga ya khotso lilirato.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Let me start with our greetings. And I know that you are in the mood because we are here to bury a revolutionary. We are here to say farewell to one of our own, a great revolutionary. Amanda! Mata! All power! Comrades, we are assembled here, all of us, with tears in our eyes, a lump in our throat, and a deep pain in our hearts. We are here to bid a sad farewell to one of our own, an international revolutionary and internationalist, Comrade Fidel Castro. The name Fidel Castro is important to us because it is that name that conjures up that fight for freedom, a fight to end oppression. I had the great honor and pleasure of being part of a contingent of young people from all over the world attending the World Youth Festival in Cuba. And I had the pleasure of meeting Comrade Fidel personally. He had a warm heart. He had a very strong bear hug. When he hugged you with his bear hug, you felt like he was squeezing your lifeblood out of you. But he had a great sense of humor. He always had a twinkle in his eyes because he said, the future is yours, referring to all of us, young people representing the world. Indeed, he was right. We turned a difficult situation into one of freedom, not just in South Africa, but all over the world. We'll always remember Fidel Castro for having contributed to our own liberation, to our own freedom. But most important, he changed the balance of forces internationally in the world. We are where we are today because of the revolutionaries of Cuba, and in particular, Fidel. We are where we are today because they dreamt an impossible dream. We learned from them to dream the impossible dream. We learned to turn that impossible dream into reality. We dreamt of freedom. We fought for freedom. And some died for freedom. That dream is now a reality. The Cuban people played an important part, not just in our own dreams of freedom, not just in liberating Cuba, but also contributing to Latin America's freedom, and also decolonization of Africa and economic support for the African continent. We are all the better for having known Fidel. We are all the worse for having lost Fidel. There's this deep pain that will not go away from our hearts because of what he represented and who he was. Simple, down to earth, a wonderful individual. And he loved children. And he made sure that the future belonged to the children, to the young generation. He always urged us to make sure that whatever we do, we should never ever destroy the future. The future does not belong to us. It belongs to the younger generation, the future. We need to build that future. We need to create a future where every young person shall enjoy life to the fullest. As I said, I had the pleasure of meeting Fidel in Cuba, Havana. It was a world festival, and there were only two people who spoke at that festival. And both of them made moving speeches and statements. One of them, of course, was Fidel. He was welcoming us. And the other one who spoke on behalf of the world, the youth of the world, was a South African. He was an ANC person. He was a leader of the ANC Youth League, youth movement. That was Comrade Eddie Funde. Sadly, Comrade Funde met with an accident. He's now paralyzed. But we will remember his contribution to our own freedom, He was a tireless fighter for freedom. And also he represented the youth of the world in the highest platform in Havana, Cuba. We are where we are today, all of us, because of where we come from and because of those who went before us. Great leaders of the South African Revolution, from the Communist Party, from the ANC. But most important, we ourselves are internationalists. Our struggle is a product of an international struggle for freedom. We were revolutionaries. I joined the struggle when I was 15, 16. And what we sometimes forget is the role that Africa played in our own liberation. Some of us were in the camps in Angola, in Zambia, everywhere. And the warmth and spirit of those people towards our struggle, I think, should never be forgotten. We owe the world, the people of the world, a great tribute. And the only way we can repay, not that we ever can repay, is to make sure that our democracy works. Our democracy should be a democracy that works not for a few, but for the majority. Our democracy should symbolize the spirit of freedom, of no surrender, the spirit of going ahead to make it better for all of us, not better for some, but all of us. We are fortunate that there are those revolutionaries who went before us. Mandela, Sulu, Tambo. They are no longer here today with us, but they are here with us in spirit. What they represent or represented continues to be something that continues to inspire us. We should try to be better, and people say it's not possible, but it is possible. We should all of us try to be better than our best. And we can, and we shall, and we should. So in conclusion, I'd like to say, paying tribute to a great fighter, a great revolutionary, let's emulate not just what he stood for, but his simplicity, his honesty, his integrity, his desire to make sure that everybody lives a better life than before. We can, we shall, and should make South Africa a better place for all. We are inspired by great revolutionaries from all over the world, including Fidel Castro. And in saying goodbye to him, with tears in our eyes and lump in our throats, and a pain in our hearts, we say goodbye to one of our own, a fighter, a revolutionary, a great comrade. Thank you.
I know I'm going to inconvenience her. She's still on the phone. The ambassador of the Bolivarian state of Venezuela, Comrade Mayrin Moreno, is here to pay tribute to Commandant Fidel Castro. Is that the comrade at the door? The ambassador of the Bolivarian Republic. Comrades, we will now call the Friends of Cuba Society of South Africa, represented by the National Deputy Secretary General, Comrade Clever Banganani. Those of you who have been in the picket lines, who have been in the marches, who have seen the nice t-shirts, you know, Friends of Cuba Society is known for very nice t-shirts. We'll remember Comrade Clever, always there. The brigades, which goes to Cuba every year in solidarity. The conferences, all of us rally around the Friends of Cuba Society, which is a coordinating body for solidarity with the people of Cuba. Comrade Clever. But before that, I think I would have made a mistake if I don't invite, I'm not sure whether I'm going to create a problem for her, Sister Jim Tinzo, to join the leadership here. I'm not sure whether I'm creating an inconvenience for you to come and join the leadership here. Sister Jim Tinzo is one of our leaders. Is our ambassador she's currently our ambassador in the Republic of Romania. Has been an ambassador of the South African government, South Africa in Cuba. She was our ambassador in Cuba before. And you all know, comrades, that Sister Nji was our Deputy Secretary General when we went to the conference in Stellenbosch and did not stand in that conference. She was also in the High Command of Umkhonto weSizwe.
Thank you, Comrade Hope. To the national leadership of the ANC, the national leadership of SACP, the national leadership of COSATU, the national leadership of SANCO, and to all of you who are here. Before I begin my deliberation, I would like first of all to thank the African National Congress for allowing South Africans to come and honor our late Commandant in Jefe, Comrade Fidel Castro. I know from my experience of solidarity with Cuba that South Africans love Fidel Castro. There is a documentary that was recently released which shows the relationship that exists between South Africa and Cuba. And what we know is that the relationship between South Africa and Cuba did not start in 1994. Most of us understand that this relationship that today we are celebrating the great leader of the Cuban Revolution started just soon after the triumph of the revolution. Cuba began to train South Africans, preparing them to come and govern this country and conquer apartheid South Africa. Then in 1961, we also want to thank you, the African National Congress, for the solidarity and the support that you have given to the Cuban people. As we know, my comrade Dlamini-Zuma has said before I spoke that what Cubans sacrificed for us, we are not able to pay back because they sacrificed their blood for the liberation of South Africa. So today we are here because on the 25th of November 2016 we received the sad news of passing of Comandante Fidel Castro. So although it's a memorial service, I think we should be celebrating his life. It came just 3 months after we had had a national tour to celebrate his 90th birthday, which was on the 13th of August this year. We were still trying to go to other provinces with these celebrations up until the 25th that we received the news of his passing. But I think the passing of Fidel is a physical passing of his body. His soul will remain just as other souls of great leaders like Che Guevara, Nelson Mandela still live in us. From his early youth as a law student at the University of Havana, Fidel Castro demonstrated his qualities as a revolutionary leader. He successfully led the 26th July movement and the military struggle that overthrew the US-sponsored dictatorship in 1959. His personal commitment to the struggle, his audacity, his acute political sense, and his quality as a leader gained him respect, admiration, love of the people of Cuba, who under his direction undertook the most radical and comprehensive revolution ever in the Western Hemisphere, and stood ready to confront the unrelenting aggression of the US imperialism. His friend and comrade Che Guevara, in 1961, as he was trying to describe his character and the specific exceptional characteristics of Fidel Castro, I quote, he said, "The first and perhaps most important and original is that cosmetic force called Castro Rus. Fidel is a person of such tremendous personality that he would attain leadership in whatever movement he participated. He has qualities of a great leader, added to which are his great gifts of audacity, strength, courage, and extraordinary determination, always to discern the will of the people. He has other important qualities: his ability to assimilate knowledge, experience, and in order to understand the situation and its entirety without losing sight of the detail of his unbound faith in future and the breadth of his vision, foresee events, anticipate, then in action, always seeing further and more accurately than his comrades." Close quote. Che also highlighted Fidel Castro's capacity to unite and his faith in the future. I would remember in late 1980s, 1989 to be precise, Fidel was addressing the Cuban people in anticipation of what was going to happen in the years to come. He said to the Cuban people, "If on other things that could happen, we wake up tomorrow and find that the Soviet Union is disintegrated, something that we will not expect to happen. But even in these circumstances, the Cuban Revolution will continue to honor its people and will be stronger and stronger ever." Close quote. So this is the vision that Fidel Castro had and his anticipation of what could come in the future for his people. First as a prime minister and then as a president until his illness in 2006, Fidel Castro presided over the profound transformation that took Cuba from being a backward neo-colonial playground for the US business and mafias to become a revolutionary nation of exceptional social achievements, capable of carrying enormous solidarity to millions of people in the developing world. Fidel Castro's qualities as a statesman and his strong ideology in revolution beliefs helped him lead the people of Cuba during the difficult times of the direct US military aggression during the missile crisis of 1962. In the struggle to overcome political and diplomatic isolation, in facing the sacrifice imposed by the criminal economic blockade, during the epic military engagement in solidarity with peoples of Africa and being able to overcome the dramatic impact of collapse of socialism in the Eastern Europe, he preached internationalism and he had the gift to guide and mobilize the people of Cuba in nationwide commitment of solidarity with the struggles of liberation in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, and with promotion of social justice and basic services, those nations, particularly in the areas of health and education. His personal engagement and his capacity to lead the people of Cuba in that direction have had an impact on the lives of millions of people for the better. Fidel Castro became the friend of Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Chris Hani, Joe Slovo, Miriam Makeba, and of many South Africans. So this is why we, as the Friends of Cuba Society, we give the reason, among other things, as a voluntary solidarity organization of ordinary progressive South Africans, support the Cuban Revolution, and in its achievement, we rally behind these noble people and their cause for the heroic Cuban solidarity with sister nations, which has made it possible for our country and others on the continent to move closer to the goals of better life for all the people. We continue to call for the lifting of the more than 50 years illegal, unilateral, and just economic commercial blockade imposed on the people of Cuba by the United States. Patria o muerte, venceremos. Amanda, Amanda, viva Fidel, viva. Long live Fidel, long live Fidel. Thank you.
Oliver Tambo Bapela Band, Oliver Tambo Bapela Band, Bapela Band, Bapela Band. Bias retrench, bias casualize. Lalo Bapela, bias retrench, bias casualize. Bias right size. Oliver Tambo Bapela Band, Bapela Banto, Bapela Banto. Oliver Tambo Bapela Banto, Bapela Banto, Bapela Banto. Bias retrench, bias casualize, bias right size. Commander. Comrades, I'm now handing over to the corporal director, our leader, Comrade Ayanda Jojo. But before I take my seat to give an opportunity to lead the part of the program which deals with the alliance, I need to remind comrades that the July 26 movement participated in a number of titanic battles in Cuba before 1959. Just to list a few: Operation Verano, Battle of La Plata, Battle of Las Mercedes, Battle of Huayey, and the final Battle of Santa Clara, which was commanded by Ernesto Che Guevara, which opened the front. Some of the battles, like the battles of Yaguahay, was led by the late Commander Camilo Cienfuegos. Those were the commanders and commissars of the July 26 movement. These battles were very important. We also have our own battles in South Africa with commanders and commissars of MK who are here, will tell you about. The Battle of Shawela, all those battles, Mutale, those battles are epic battles of our own revolution, comrades. Comrade Ayanda Jojo, please take over. Yourself, a combatant of Umkhonto Wesizwe. We are also burying a soldier. We are having a memorial service of a commander of the Revolution of Cuba, Comrade Ayanda.
Thank you very much, Comrade Hope. Ngicela sifakeni ingoma. That water is, I don't know if that water is fresh. iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo Iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga. Iyo bakhalanga, iyo bakhalanga, iyo amandla, amandla. Long live the spirit of Comrade Fidel Castro, long live. Long live the spirit of international solidarity, long live. Long live the spirit of Comrade President O.R. Tambo, long live. Long live the African National Congress, long live. Thank you very much, comrades. My name is Ayanda Dlodlo, and you have to bear with me for the rest of the program. No country in the world has donated so many troops and has put so many feet on the ground, so many boots on the ground, like Cuba has. In the liberation of the people of the continent, in the liberation of the people of the Caribbean and Latin America. No other country can claim that. And Comrade Castro was correct when he said, the history of Africa will be written as before and after Cuitokwana Valley. The Battle of Cuitokwana Valley being the turning point in the struggles of the people of Southern Africa. So many people died. And as Comrade Nkosazana said earlier on, all that the Cubans took back home with them were the small boxes of cremated bodies of Cuban soldiers that had perished in that battle. And at that time, all of the Cuban soldiers, after the Cuitokwana Valley battle, all Cuban soldiers that had perished in the continent were then taken back home. So the spoils of war for the Cuban people were not diamonds, were not oils, were not coffee, were not rice, were not our currencies. The spoils of war for the Cuban people was the total emancipation of the people of the continent. He also said after that Battle of Cuitokwana Valley, rarely in the history has war been accompanied by such humanism and humility on the part of the victors. And this comes from Comrade Fidel Castro himself, a man that we will never forget. Having said that, I have the pleasure of inviting one of the ex-combatants of Umkhonto weSizwe, one of the commanders of our revolution, our former ambassador to Cuba, Comrade Jhb City Hall. And with that, can I ask the former combatants of the ANC, of our armed struggle, the women of MK, to lead in song as I invite her to the podium. Thank you very much. Mzana.
Amandla. 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 Ngiqale ngokubikelela leadership nani nonke leadership elapha, and also greet our comrades from Venezuela, from Cuba. Let's start with first things first. There's a slogan of Amakubano. Now, it was quite clear that anisibambanga kahle, and you can't talk about Amakubano without the slogan, yeah? Mina ngizoti patria o muerte, which means that our land or death, our fatherland or death. And then you say venceremos, which means that we win, victory. Patria o muerte! Patria o muerte! That's Fidel. Now, so we say viva Fidel, viva. Viva the people of Cuba, viva. The comrades who are young here have to ask the province and the region and the branch to include in the political education the history of Cuba. Is compulsory. Because if you do not do that, you will not be able, as many of us are not able to, understand the liberation of South Africa and indeed of Namibia and the defense of the revolution of Angola. For you to understand that, you've got to understand the history of the people of Cuba. And of course, that history will be the history of Fidel. Today, as Comrade Max has said, we are in mourning, but also we are celebrating a life. When people say, rest in peace, kuthiwa because you have worked, rest in peace. Otherwise, ma ungasebenzanga uzawuresta in peace for ntoni. So because we are talking about this revolutionary who gave all his life to the revolution, today we can say, Fidel, rest in peace. Now, I'm one of those lucky ones, very lucky ones, even luckier than Comrade Max. Comrade Nkosazana didn't talk about her story, but I'm lucky because I meet Fidel in about 4 stages of my life. But what is consistent in those meetings is a comrade who, at the time that I was meeting him, had never been to South Africa, but loved South Africa even more than many of us love South Africa, because he loved justice. And this is why the quotation by Comrade Nkosazana is very important, because the soldiers of Cuba died in a land that the first time they saw it was when they were going to defend it, especially after the Battle of Kwitokwana Valley. And he says that we didn't take gold or the minerals from Africa. What we brought from, what we did in Africa was to assist Africa to fight for justice. And all we were able to bring back were the body bags of our soldiers, of the children of... Now the thing about it, comrades, I have served in Cuba. Even after 1994, after our revolution, you cannot point to any mines or any material or financial benefits that Cuba can say it got. But what Comrade Fidel Castro said to our president, he was a deputy president then, when he went to Cuba in 2004, when our deputy president then, our president Jhb Zuma today, was saying, thank you Cuba for what you have done for South Africa. And Fidel says, no Zuma, you must not thank me. The only way you can thank the people of Cuba is when you enhance, you deepen, and you protect that revolution. We will know that you have thanked us. So as today, as we are today saying, Patria o muerte, that venceremos is very important. because that venceremos is our gratitude to Fidel and the people of Cuba. Comrades, amakubano ke, and I was told here because laba bantu laba bathe hayi ngoba uyayazi emkhontweni uyayibamba awutshelwa in advance you are combat ready bakhuluma isilungu esikhulu la because bangibona naku sengiyangena naku sekufuneka ngibe combat ready. But bathi ke mabengitshela bathi hayi ubatshela izitori zamakubano. So mina I'm a storyteller. I-leadership izakhuluma ipolitiki mina ngizangitshela izitori njena. Amakubano ebesitrainer kule ndawo kuthiwa iAngola, which is another story that must be told for you to understand us today. Now ke ukutrainwa enkampini ayonto emandi ndiyabeva abanye abantu masithi I will take up arms, we go to arms struggle haya kudlalelwa khona sisi nawe bhuti ungadlaleli pa we had no option but to use that but ungadlaleli khona. Now amakubano afika enantsikeni eAngola in the camps. Now aba bantu basuka apha are young people, very young people. By the way, about 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds. And lento kuthiwa discipline noko bebengenayo. Bebenesimilo nje sasekhaya but discipline. Zafika ezintomani. Hey, zayichinja imeko yasenkampini. Kwabashushu afikile amakubano. Astraina amakubano. Now this training ke now siva istory kwabanye abantu torho khona MKV app yazithetha stories zokutrainwa. But what was very important about amakubano was the fact that they were able to tell us that you are not going to liberate your country ningena discipline, and you are not going to be able to liberate your country ningamagwala. Yabona into ye cowardice and Cuba that they are mutually exclusive. And you are not going to be able to do this training when you are lazy. Enkampini ke lento xa ulazy bekuthiwa uyaloya so kusho ukuthi uligqirhanyana ufuna ukwenza izinto ezenziwayo. Now ke kuyalanjwa ke maqabane ezinkampini ayonto ayakho kudla pha kuyalanjwa. La makubano eze nomphakwana wawo torho, we were not sure what this is but it was called this lava. Itin staff ethile nje. They will make you march for 2 days uphethe nale bhona lento yesilava necondensed milk. Many of us MK combatants asiki na namhlanje ikondance, because each time you felt like you are hungry they just give you iyavulwa imingxuma emibini and then you just have to umome le condance. But what they also taught us was the question of sacrifice. At that time many of us were young. Oh, I was young. Many of the combatants I know were very young, younger than me. But they showed us and they taught us about the other life, is socialism. Besiloko sifunda ngayo, but zange sibone a live socialist or live communist. And when we looked at them, we said, yo, kunzima kwa socialism. Kodwa ingathi kumandi kwa socialism. Because of how the Cubans were carrying themselves for a struggle that was not their own struggle, for a struggle that was being fought far away, more than 10,000 kilometers. They were fighting a struggle, a just struggle for the liberation of the people of South Africa. And that we've also always got to bear in mind that when we say that people died for this revolution, it's not only South Africans, it's those Cubans. They still go hungry today because at that time they could have chosen a path that was going to make them produce in their country, mind their own business and be rich, but they didn't. That's internationalism. To what extent are we as South Africans today internationalist in our outlook? That is something that would have to be asking as we bury to Fidel. Now Maqabane, there's this story of this Kwito Kwanavale. And I don't think many of us understand what this Kwito Kwanavale was. You see, at that particular time, the Angolans had won their revolution, but kwakukho into eyayibizwa iUNITA. But in Namibia ingakawini, yayisesezinkampini pha neSouth Africa. Cut a long story short, SADF decides that if it can take over Equator Valley, then the Angolan revolution shall have been reversed, because they are going to divide Angola into two. Baplane kapo baplana khona ku SADF. And Fidel, together with a comrade called Risket and many others, they get to know and they get asked by the Angolan government, Uguti, please help us. By this time, there are Cubans in Angola, some of whom are training us, others are training the Angolan army. I tell you a date that you must remember, the 23rd of March 1988. They have planned, SADF ichongokwayo iti, I quote them, Colonel Breitenbach. Uti, the UNITA soldiers did a lot of dying that day. And the full weight of FAPLA and the Cuban defense with their fire was brought down on the heads of SADF. Gesxhosa sabababethwa bathi sa kula Equator Valley, bathi sa figuratively and literally. Literally in the sense that they were driven back into South Africa. That's the Battle of Equator Valley. And it is led by FAPLA and the Cubans. And if at all that battle had not been won that day, they would have reversed the revolution in Angola, thwarted the freedom of Namibia, and completely eliminated the possibilities of freedom of South Africa. This is why our history, as Fidel says the history of Africa, as Comrade Wasicho, will be written as before Quito and after Quito. And that is Fidel Castro. And it is important, comrades, that we appreciate as we bury Fidel, that literally he gave his life not only for Cuba, but also for Africa, and also particularly for South Africa. Uthi ke uFidel, ucomrade, esasiyotrainwa naye, sahamba bethuna siligcuntswana siyotrainwa eCuba. So when he sees this group of us, I think we're a group of 15. Let me just step back a little bit. Now, Fidel was not the kind of president that had distance between him and the people. And if you did not know him, unfortunately, he had a figure that you could not miss. You would just pass on and go to odlulayo lapha. We are sitting, minding our own business, of course, with the usual. Even as a Cuba, they still gave us ikondanis. We thought that when we got to Cuba, we're not going to have this condensed in the camps there, but we still got ikondanis. It was there in abundance. So he says to us, what is critical for Nina, young people here, we're still young then, is not so much the guns that we're going to be teaching you and the arms that we're going to be teaching you on how to handle. What is important is the politics behind that gun, and the politics of the person that is holding the gun. And this is a slogan of Umkhonto weSizwe, that it's not so much the gun that is important, but the politics. And we got that, especially from Fidel. Diyeke bethuna, bazawuthetha inkokeli. Just want to count a few of these values that Fidel lived by, not just pronounced on, but lived by. Service. Service, servicio. Everywhere is service, service, service. It's sacrifice, it's selflessness. And above all is humility. Now you still have to find a Cuban, especially those in leadership, that do not display humility. Because most of the time, the Cuban leaders and leadership, unless you are told that they are holding a particular responsibility, a Cuba is not called a position, it's called the responsibilities. A position, but a responsibility. So that humility is something that is ingrained in the Cubans. And as I said, that the Cubans have shown us the other side of life, that it does not have to be capitalism. There is an option. There is another route that we can take. Fidel, as Comrade Nkosazana has already said, loved women, loved the emancipation of women. This is about wrong, but loved women. Loved the emancipation of women. But in addition to that, he really felt very strongly about the youth, to the extent that each time you say anything to him, when I was now the ambassador, he will then ask you for the statistics about the youth. When you then say there's there's poverty, and he says, give me the figures. How many young people, where do they stay? What is their education? What are they doing? When you talk about poverty, what are the statistics in relation to youth? The young people that are here today, I want to leave you with this thing of Fidel, that one of the most important things that he was teaching our young people is that there are many things that you yourself personally, yourself, can do for the development not only of yourself, but of the young people and of your country. It's important, therefore, that our young people, with all the problems and challenges we have, should actually commit themselves to do their best to take themselves out of that poverty and to assist our communities to move out of that poverty, out of that inequality. So, my comrades, and therefore it's a day of celebration. It's a day of mourning, but it's a day of celebration. Patria o muerte!
Abasazi basizwa ngendaba. It is slogan. It is slogan. It is slogan. Amandla. Castro, 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 Amandla! Comrades, for the Cuito-Cuanavale battle, which really brought about the total liberation of Southern Africa, Comrade President Fidel Castro sent 55,000 troops on the ground. To protect the independence and the liberation of Angola in 1975, he sent 36,000 fighters. And it is said that the last of Castro's 30,000 troops in August returned to Cuba at the end of May 1991. They were greeted with great fanfare as international heroes. Previously, in early December 1989, the remains of soldiers who died in Africa, some 2,300, each in small boxes, had reached Cuba for reburial. Whether the boxes held cremated ashes or skeletal scraps was never revealed. This is what the Cubans took home with them. I would now like to invite the president of COSATU, Comrade Dumo, to give us a few words about what he and COSATU regard as the hero of our revolution. Thank you.
Amandla, thank you very much, Program Director Sis Ayanda. The leadership that has been acknowledged by you program director, for whom I am honored and proud to speak after them and before them. They are leaders of great note in our country, and I respect all of them. I speak on behalf of the Congress of the South African Trade Unions, on behalf of the workers in the country who are deeply saddened by the passing on of our true commander-in-chief, who has taken the battle of the workers wherever they were. So we are here also to pay our respect, but also to mourn and celebrate the life of our hero. So the leaders that have spoken before me have said quite a lot about what the Cuban Revolution has done for the people of South Africa and people of Africa and people of the globe. In particular, those who are victims, those who are casualties of imperialism. The struggle of the workers would have been meaningless if we never understood what the Cuban Revolution stood for. And we've looked and observed Fidel Castro as a decisive leader. With the collective that he led with, they decided that Cuba was to be a socialist country. And indeed, they fought to ensure that that would be achieved against a very hostile American imperialism. So we can say we are indeed, as workers in the country, are a direct beneficiary of the Cuban Revolution under Commander Fidel Castro, because today I can report to this meeting we are busy now working to finalize what could be a fitting national minimum wage for the lowest, or for the worker who is at the lowest end of the stick. And I think it's a fight, it's a struggle, working together with the government of the Republic and the African National Congress in particular. It's a battle we shall win for the workers of this country. Last week we received for the first time a comprehensive social security paper from government. A very important debate that must also talk to how we cushion those who are at the lowest end of the economy. A few months back, we received the white paper on the National Health Insurance, the NHI. And I can count quite a lot what the workers of this country, working and not working, every day they fill the streets of South Africa chanting, dancing, singing, calling for these freedoms. And we can say so because I know for a fact that when South Africa first had to begin a debate about the national health insurance, the Minister of Health then was at pains to say to South Africans, if you look to how the Cubans are doing it, South Africa can have it also. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, you were the one. That therefore was inspiring us as the workers to say, indeed, this revolution means something for us as the workers in South Africa. So, I'm simply not gonna take your time, Program Director, hailing praises, because praises of a man, a woman who is a hero is when his or her work follow him. Imsebenzi yakhe imkhulumele noma esethulile. So, this is what we need to do going forward. We are arguing as workers in South Africa. Let us build a strong, united, ANC-led alliance in South Africa. Let us just close ranks and face the real fight that is against us. And the real fight that we can wage is to ensure that the triple challenge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality can be won. And we shall succeed if we close ranks. And let us stop beginning to identify and see enemies amongst ourselves when the battle is hitting on. This is what you would expect as we remember Fidel Castro, because as he is quoted by the program director here, indeed, the success of the revolution of South Africa, which would benefit the downtrodden, the black in general and Africans in particular, will be how we shall say and say thank you to Fidel Castro. So I thank you for this time. Let us simply, comrades, stop seeing enemies amongst ourselves. Let us hold hands and fight this battle. It is out there. It wants to remove this ANC-led government. That is the real battle that is confronting us. There is no time for any other thing. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Dumo, for the inspiring words, and words that remind us that Cuba sent boxes of dead bodies back to their country to liberate you and I, and that we should never take for granted. Reverend Jesse Jackson from the United States has this to say about Fidel Castro. He says, Castro's defiance and pride consolidated the hatred of the US governing circles. He exported doctors and teachers while the United States exported weapons and wars. He goes on to say, across the world and in some parts of the United States, Castro was and is celebrated. He stood with Africans against European imperialism and South African apartheid. He stood with Latin America against Yankee domination and corrupt regimes. He dispatched doctors across the world to non-aligned nations, earning friends and saving lives in many countries. That is the Castro that is known throughout the world. I will then like to invite Sanko, Comrade Diskosana, to come and give us a few words about the way that Sanko regards the man. Thank you.
Mandla! Viva ANC, viva! Viva Kosato, viva! Viva SACP, viva! Qina mhlali, qina! Qina mhlali, qina! Khuluma mhlali, khuluma! Program Director, somebody strategically made it a point that I sit next to the SG. As I stand up, I got intimidated. Ungalibaluba, I cannot address him. The leadership of the Revolutionary Alliance, led by the African National Congress, we as the South African Civic Organization joins the Cuban people who are mourning the death of the Cuban revolutionary leader, Comandante President Fidel Castro, and celebrating the life of a colossal internationalist. No other political figure outside Africa symbolized global solidarity with the aspirations of the people from the northern regions to the south continent than Commandant Fidel Castro. Like our own global icon, Nelson Mandela, Comrade Castro had dedicated his entire life to serving humanity and championed the cause of international solidarity and freedom for the downtrodden and oppressed across the world. Historical, political, and cultural ties between the people of Africa and Cuba extend back for over 5 centuries. Cuba was colonized by European empires, utilizing the labor of enslaved Africans, whose super exploitation laid the basis for the rise of world capitalism and imperialism. In a speech delivered by President Castro on the 19th of April 1976 in Havana, commemorating the 15th anniversary of the heroic victory over exiled mercenaries coordinated by Central Intelligence Agency operatives at Playa Giron, the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban leader said, and I want to quote him, "We are a Latin African people, enemies of colonialism, neo-colonialism, racism, apartheid, which Yankee imperialism aids and protects," close quote. Like Isitaola and Nelson Mandela, he gave up his legal profession to pursue an armed struggle against the authoritarian government of United States-backed Batista. He was a gallant fighter who led the 26th of July movement and made it his lifetime mission to fight and defeat imperialism, colonialism, and fascism. He inspired our struggle for liberation and as a true champion of the poor, marshaled support for our post-apartheid programs aimed at improving the health care system, eradicating illiteracy, as well as sharing expertise for the People's Housing programs and changing the lives of our people. Though the world will be poorer without Castro, his legacy and bond of friendship that he established with life forever in the monument of the hearts of our people. His indomitable spirit that inspired our freedom fighters to take a stand and repel enemy forces at the Battle of Quarto Conleval will inspire generations to come. Castro was an internationalist to whom we will forever remain indebted for supporting our struggle for liberation. Today, we remember that destabilizers of the world peace, instigators of conflicts, and those who plundered Africa for its mineral resources are responsible for destroying the economy of Cuba. They're the same ones that engineered the overthrow of the democratically elected Salvador Allende in Chile. We remember that the first democratically elected leader in Chile was overthrown through imperialist forces led by the United States and the CIA. The Cuba's willingness to fight side by side Africans made Castro a towering figure on that continent. In 1975, as Angola gained independence from Portugal, it offered a safe haven to then liberation movements hunted in their own countries. When the apartheid government, aided by the United States, attacked Angola, it was Castro who came to the Africa's aid. The 36,000 troops who he sent and succeeded in pushing the South African soldiers back while also training the fighters themselves. Cuban troops remained in Africa until in 1998, when in apartheid South Africa agreed to withdraw and grant independence to Namibia. Castro's defiance of the United States was seen as a defiance of imperialism and neocolonialism by African fighters. Nelson Mandela once reportedly said that when he heard of the Cuban army's victories in Angola, he was heartened by the idea of 9 white army outmaneuvering a white army. Upon his release, Castro was the first leader Mandela met and dismissed criticism of his friendship with a politically isolated Castro. This is what Mandela said: "We're now being advised about Cuba by people who have supported the apartheid regime these last 40 years. And he continued to say, no honorable man or woman could ever accept advice from people who never cared for us at the most difficult times. The struggle of the people of Cuba is our struggle. Long live the undying spirit of Fidel Castro, long live. Amandla. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kosana. As I invite the second Deputy General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, I would like to remind you of what Amilcar Cabral had to say of the Cuban people. He said the Cuban combatants are ready to sacrifice their lives. They're ready to sacrifice their lives to free our countries, and in exchange for that, they take back their fallen heroes. Comrade Solima Paila, I invite you to the podium.
How many minutes? Sandla sangwetambupa.
Amandla, Matla, all power. Long live Comrade Fidel Castro, long live. Long live Cuban internationalism, long live. Viva ANC, viva. Viva SABC, viva. Viva COSATU, viva. Viva Sanko, viva. Viva ANC Women's League, viva. Viva ANC Veterans League, viva. Viva MKMVA, viva. Viva ANC Youth League, viva. Viva YCL, viva. Viva COSAS, viva. Viva SASCO, viva. Amandla. Comrade Chair, thank you very much. I got a strict command from the SG that I must not say anything until he's back. I hope I'm not going to be ill-disciplined. I'll proceed. You will find me speaking. But let me first greet the leadership of the ANC, led by Comrade Gwede Mantashe, and all other members of the NEC present. The leadership of COSATU, led by Comrade Dlamini, and all leaders of COSATU are present here. I've seen several leaders of affiliates. The leadership of SANCO, led by Comrade SPD Skosana, and all other comrades of SANCO present here. The leadership of our SACP, led by Comrade Senzeni Zogwana, who had to leave because he's going abroad on government work. And the leadership of our province, led by Comrade Jacob Mamabulo and Joe Mpisi. Comrade Hope, as well as Comrade Ayanda Dlodlo, Comrade Tenji, Comrade Maxi Sulu, Comrade Clever Bangani, of course, Umamunkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Comrades, our few message of solidarity to the Cuban people since the passing on of Commander Fidel Castro. Well, let me apologize and greet the ambassador of Venezuela, Comrade Merino, as well as the ambassador of South Africa and Romania, Comrade Tenjo Mtinto. Our former ambassador in Cuba and our deployee in Latin America at the time. In fact, I'm going to share what Fidel told you when we asked you to, when he met with you as a party representative, which you shared with the PB. It was many years ago. Maybe let me start there. He says that revolution is very important and strategic for the continent. But that there's too much money in that revolution. Too much money in the revolution. That's going to cause problems. That was Fidel many years ago. You reported that to the PB. Now, without diverting, let me say, Fidel Castro for us represents the greatest communist revolutionary, a great humanist and internationalist, an epitome of humanity, a true revolutionary, a selfless combatant, a comrade who will not ask you to do something that he himself will not be able to do. He was a leader that was personified by example. When the Cuban Revolution succeeded on the 1st of January 1959, it took them just 5 months, SG, to transfer the land which signifies the basis of whether society is equal or not.
is at the cornerstone of what we call property relations in society. And the basis of property relations signifies as well the methods of production in that society. They transferred land within 5 months to the masses of Cuba, to the peasant. They took land, they nationalized land from monopoly capital, largely foreign owned from America. That is why in 1961 the Americans responded by trying to invade Cuba through the Bay of Pigs invasion. Guess who defended the land? First, the peasants, who were now owners of the land, came to the streets to defend their land. They were not abstractly defending the revolution. They were defending the direct product of the revolution, which is the land, which is now their livelihood. When we talk about the revolution, we talk about something tangible. Comrade Tenji was talking about the statistics that Fidel will always ask about the youth. In fact, in many instances, when he goes to the statistics, when he talks about the statistics of poverty, here in our movement, we talk about the challenge of inequality, poverty, unemployment, and so forth. But it remains statistics. It's less revolutionary. It's just a social problem that we identify. In statistical form, we must say how many people are poor, how many people sleep without food on a daily basis, how many people are unemployed, what is their livelihood, and what are we doing about them as a revolution. That's what the socialist revolution has become, or was in Cuba, and still is. So when they deal with statistics, they deal with the social problem so that they are able to resolve. It's an indicator of the social problem that they use to resolve societal problems. The other thing is that just from the beginning they realized, and this has become also a hallmark of Fidel Castro's contribution in the world movement, revolutionary movement, the battle of ideas and development of social consciousness. When they realized that just after taking over, majority of Cubans were illiterate and innumerate, they then launched a campaign under the slogan which we adopted through COSAS, each one teach one. It's a Cuban slogan, to teach every single person to read and write in Cuba so that they can communicate with the revolution. Because in many instances, this is what it means. Comrade SG, we can put many slogans in the campaign for elections, for instance. Put statistics about what we have done as a revolutionary government. But the poor can't read. They don't know what is there on the street. So it's simple flowers. That is why the revolution must prioritize itself. The Cuban Revolution was able to succeed to build the fundamentals of socialism, which is practically about meeting social needs, basic needs of the people, to have food, to have shelter, to have clothing, to have education, to have health. The rest are luxurious things. That's how that revolution succeeded, at the helm by Fidel Castro. So we have to reprioritize in his memory. Let's not celebrate Fidel Castro in abstract, so that we self-praise ourselves. We have to be critical of ourselves so that we strengthen ourselves from our own criticism. So our criticism should be constructive criticism, not criticism that destroys, but criticism that builds and advances our revolution. Because that's what Fidel Castro was about. Fidel Castro was also against those who caused divisions in the movement, against the imperialist forces. And he identified that primarily the imperialist forces, particularly the USA, were the leading organ and instrument worldwide that subverted revolutions. That is why, Comrade Kosana, when you talk about Allende, when he went to see Allende, who was the first socialist leader in Latin America to win the revolution by ballot, when Fidel went there with the first visit, he took with him an AK-47, silver in color, and say, here is the weapon to defend the revolution. How do we defend our revolution here? at home. We can't even build a basic street committee. And you think you can defend the revolution? We have to reorganize ourselves and defend this revolution. He established the committees for the defense of the revolution. Every single street, the masses learn about the revolution throughout. The revolution is not an abstract thing. It's about identifying the threats and how to confront those threats selflessly. This is Fidel Castro, the man who inspired us. When he sent through Operation Carlota, Carlota was an African woman slave in Cuba who in 1834 led a struggle for slaves to free themselves in Cuba to fight, and they were killed. In his memory, he launched Operation Carlota to defend the revolution in Angola, the one that Comrade Tenje and Comrade Ayanda have been speaking about. When they defended that revolution, overall 55,000 soldiers there, including military technical personnel. As he said, it was a symbol of Cuban internationalism. But he was sending an example to the whole world. By the way, he did not even inform the Soviet Union, who were his main backers, when he sent those troops there. It was even at the risk of the Cuban Revolution itself. He took an independent decision. He became sovereign as a state. The Cuban state, one thing I can assure you, is that it's sovereign. Our state, I know, it's sovereign. That is why we in the Communist Party have raised issues in our movement inside the alliance about the notion of corporate state capture. Underline the word corporate state capture. That is state capture by monopoly capital. If you allow the corporates to control your state, to decide what happens in your state, you cannot run a sovereign state. As we are here, I can tell you, the Angolan government has sent several planes, SG, to Angola to go and pay proper tribute to Fidel Castro. We can't even dare to do it here because we are afraid. We have to actually appreciate the contribution of the Cubans, and on the basis of that, be able to pay proper solidarity with the people of Cuba. Therefore, I'm finishing, Comrade Ayanda. I'm finishing in just a minute. Amanda! Long live Fidel Castro, long live! Fidel Castro, comrade, was also a disciplined cadre of the movement. I'm going to accept the instruction by Comrade Kayanda, who's my commander in MK. But to say this lastly, comrades, our revolution should apologize to nobody. Our revolution was won by blood and sweat, by the blood of our martyrs. Those are the people that we pay homage: Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, Krizani, Joe Slovo, who died fighting for this land. Our revolution must free itself from all corporates, the Guptas, the Ruperts, and everybody else. We have no apology in that regard as the SACP. There, comrades, we have no apology in that regard. To defend this revolution and to unite ourselves will be to fight against corporate capture. Long live Fidel Castro, long live! Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Soli. Siwelelema, yo, siwelelema, seguzoka lipazuka, siwelelema. Yeletina, bafana bomkol, seguzoka lipazuka, siwelelema. Tina bafana bomkol, seguzoka lipazuka, siwelelema. Yao, siwelelema, seguzoka lipazuka, siwelelema. Oh, siwelelema, seguzo kalipazu. Nombeko take over. Kiletina, bafana bomko, seguzo kalipazuka, siwelelema. Bafana bomko, seguzo kalipazuka, siwelelema. Comrade Nombeko, take over.
Oh yeah, we are mama. Oh yeah, we are mama. Park, we're not talking. Analyst. Park, we're not talking. Oh, analyst. Oh. Early in the morning, we are live. During dinner time, Kalingwak, revolution, solution, revolution, solution. Sai wala song, healing bomb. Sai wala song, healing bomb. Tambongomo, come and toss. Tambongomo, killer one. Damn some cunt, see a snipe. See the missile, shine quack. Damn some cunt, see a snipe. See the missile, shine quack. Revolution, solution. Revolution, solution. Why the none? Not. Why the none? Chocolate. Early in the morning, Kalis bomb. During dinner time, Kalis walk. Mangela band, come a search. Ask the missile, shine quack. Birbatabata, Klaman. Herbatabata, Yavasan. Margaret Thatch, Homoloy. Margaret Thatch, Salalamund. Early in the morning, we all live. Bagoti, how? Klaman. Bagoti, how? Yavasan. Early in the morning, we all live. During dinner time, Kalim Kwok, Wangela Band, Hamasot,
Amanda! Amanda! Thank you very much, Commander Nombeko. As I invite the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, I would like to put this to you as it came from the mouth of Comrade Fidel Castro in explaining why it is that they always have the urge to help countries to liberate themselves. He says, and I quote, "As we have said before, being internationalists is paying our debt to humanity. Those who are incapable of fighting for others will never be capable of fighting for themselves. And the heroism shown by our forces, by our people in other lands, faraway lands, must also serve to let the imperialists know what awaits them if one day they force us to fight on this land here. Amandla! Comrade Secretary General of the African National Congress, may I invite you to the podium? Asim Tateni Ngombo SG.
Wait, Laman, resting.
Amandla, awethu, Matla, Aruna, Matimba, Aina, Manda, Ashu, all power. Thank you very much, comrade program directors, leaders of the movement, as Koyo Apa, zonke NEC members as Lapa, but Max, Sinkosazana, Comrade Mahlobo, Comrade Stumo, whoever I left, Comrade Zogwana, Ingokeles Koyo Apa, the Communist Party, Comrade Zogwana, Comrade Soli, and the Bizekes National, the Karazongi structures, all organization. Ingokheli is a Kosatu, Kogolong President Wayo, Comrade Stumo. Kokel Sango, Kogelwa, SPD, Skosana. Ingokel Leagues, Zonge. I-veterans uqala Comrade Max omama i-Women's League ulutsha le-ANC Youth League i-PYA yonke Youth League ayibambisene ne-YCL ne-SASCO ne-COSAS. If zikhona i-ambassadors ezikhoyo apha sibone leyase Venezuela nezinye ngaba zikhona siyavuya ukuba sibe lapha iinkokheli ze-liberation movements ezikhoyo apha, all the honorable guests and all of us present here, the hosts, because we are the hosts. Sizekuni Apa were hosted by you. I guess, comrade, that it is proper for me to first of all report that the president of the ANC and the president of the Republic, Comrade Jhb Zuma, is in Cuba. And he has already delivered our message in the service in Cuba, which included the cremation of the body of Comrade Castro. That is important because sometimes we don't explain these things and people ask themselves, who president? On this occasion of the memorial service, a moment of reflection and celebration of the life lived to the fullest in the struggle for humanity. I extend special greetings and heartfelt condolences from the ANC the ambassador and the embassy of Cuba, to the people of Cuba and the nation of Cuba, on the passing of El Comandante Comrade Fidel Castro, who they affectionately called Fidel. Comrade Tenjiwe, I happened to be in a trip that Comrade Chris undertook, the last trip he took in 1993 to Cuba. And to me, since then, going to Cuba is a feeling of a pilgrimage because of what you learn. My comrade will remember that when we returned from that trip, we were elected in the first councils in 1995. I want to challenge the comrades in Gauteng to go to a township called Vosloorus and see how the health system of Cuba was implemented there. If you go to Vosloorus, it's one township I know that is having that system. Nobody walks more than 5 kilometers without getting into a health facility. And that was inspired by the visit to Cuba, and we came back, wanted to experiment with this, whether it would work in a system, because our system is capitalism, comrade. We're having a capitalist economy. We may pretend to call it any other thing, whether that system will work to the fullest under the system. Fidel Castro is described as a voice that could not be stifled. A voice that rose from its breast, even at its loneliest, fired by its heart. That is the description of Comrade Fidel Castro. The voice that rallied a middle crow, transformed it into a disciplined and dedicated freedom fighters, from the exile of Mexico into the forest of Sierra, to the march on Moncada and the streets of Havana and Santiago. Its echo sent tremors into the heart of the White House, making Pentagon to hatch a plan after plan on how it could be stifled and silenced. Now, this small island, 90 kilometers from the United States, was a pain on the side of the United States all the time. Describing the conviction and passion, reflecting on when he agreed to join Castro after their meeting in Mexico, Che Guevara says, I'm quoting, "I had thought it quite doubtful when I first enrolled with the rebel commander to whom I was linked from the beginning by a liking for romantic adventure and the thought that it would be well worth dying on a foreign beach for such a pure ideal." That is the description that Comrade Che Guevara gives to Castro. Fidel is the voice that could only rise louder among all those who love justice, love their people, love their country, love humanity. As he so poignantly said in his historic speech, "History will absolve me," in 1953. This is what he said: "If there is in your hearts a vestige of love for your country, love for humanity, love for justice, listen carefully. I know that I will be silenced for many years. I know that the regime will try to suppress the truth by all possible means. I know that there will be a conspiracy to bury me in the oblivion, but my voice will not be stifled. It will rise from the breast even when I feel most alone. And my heart will give it all the fire that callous cowards deny it. Now, this is the voice of Fidel Castro. He bases everything on love. We had a discussion, after a very painful discussion we had over the weekend, Bramex. One of the things that came out of the meeting was the depth of hatred among comrades, let alone disagreeing. There's nothing wrong when comrades disagree. There's everything wrong when that disagreement becomes hatred. Because we are being taught to hate. If we're being taught to hate, we can be taught to love. We must be able to disagree, but still continue loving each other, understanding that we are comrades. We may disagree. We may disagree on a particular point, but it is the most dangerous thing is every time a comrade raises a point I disagree with, I put that comrade in a box, and I think I can ban that box and ban that comrade in that box. It's the worst thing that can happen to our movement. Now, I'm raising that if you take this to heart, if there is in your heart a vestige of love for your country, love for humanity, love for justice, listen very carefully. Love is the basis for unity. Because if you don't love each other, there will be no basis for unity. There is only a basis for division, and hatred will never unite any movement. Now, indeed, that voice could not be stifled or subjected to cowardice even at the time when the Cuban delegation experienced the worst treatment when it attended the United Nations General Assembly in 1960. These were, of course, the earliest indications of how imperialist USA both feared and hated this voice. The voice of Castro was undeterred in how it disparaged imperialism. This is what he said in 1960. If we were the kind of men they tried to depict at all costs, imperialism would not have lost all hope, as it did long ago, of somehow having or seducing us, of somehow buying or seducing us. But since they lost that hope a long time ago, though they never had reasons to sustain it, after having stated that the Cuban delegation lodged in a brothel, they should at least realize that imperialist financial capital is a prostitute that cannot seduce us. Now, he's depicting imperialism as a prostitute. And he says, this prostitute called imperialism will never seduce us as the people of Cuba. You can look at it as Cuba. Comrade Soli talks here about the impact of money in politics. The impact of money in politics, comrade, is a function of imperialism seducing revolutionaries to lose their vision and deviate from the cause. Now, when we go to conference of the ANC, there is a lot of cash flow around that conference. We must all know this prostitute called imperialism is deviating us, it is seducing us to take our eye off the ball. And it is that seducement by imperialism and cash that translate into hatred I described earlier. Because if you don't agree with me, you are the enemy. and the money will do the work and will never look into ideological clarity. Will focus on the resources. And therefore, ideological clarity on the part of the cadres of the movement will mean nothing. What will mean a lot will be the ability to pay, and therefore we'll all sell our movement to the highest bidder. Now, it may be that imperialist forces had the power and the wealth from the voice, but elected to play dumb because they resisted to follow its call of humanity. They feared living with conviction and conscience, who in their heart of hearts could not hear that voice lifted high above enthralled faces at the Revolution Square to reach the furthest corner of the globe, where men and women for the free, equal, and just society, who could be so obstinate and lacking in emotion, not hear impassioned vocal choral that ask why it is that some should live in a better world while others live in squalor. That's the question that we should all confront. Why should others live in a better world when others live in squalor? The visit by the Women's League to Alex reminded our delegation from the Women's League of this reality, of others living comfortable and others living in squalor. And if, comrades, we don't go out of our way to address this separation of our society into those who live in a better world and those who live in squalor, we are going to actually find it difficult to suppress a revolt. That is a call on all of us as a revolutionary movement. You know, Comrade Gooks, over the weekend, Comrade Ngozaza and I took this to heart. He reminded us, hey, listen, comrade, we are not a congregation where all the time the best priest is the one who just left and the one who is coming. We are a revolutionary movement. And therefore, if we remove our eyes from the cause of the revolution, it is not worth calling ourselves revolutionaries. A voice so potent that it could take even human rights to a higher understanding of humanity, urging its people in the world. He said, human rights are often talked about. When imperialists attack China or Cuba or any socialist country, the entry point will be, where are the human rights? But we must also talk about rights of humanity. That's what Fidel talks about. Why do some people have to walk for others to travel in luxury cars? Why do some have to live 35 years and others live 70 years? He says that is not just human rights, it's also rights of humanity. Big difference. Human rights and rights of humanity. Why should others walk long distances while others have to travel in luxury cars? Why should others live 35 years while others live 70 years? And therefore, when we talk of immortality rate, we must think about this. It's not a human rights issue. It is a right of humanity. Fidel Castro, the voice fired by its heart, refusing to be numb to the call of human solidarity that came from and across the seas, beckoning on it to join in the liberation war. So fired was the voice, it rumbled in the jungles of Congo, and 100 in battlefield of Quito Carnival to defeat the mighty evil army of apartheid regime. This army was, you see today, when we talk of regime change, we sound like paranoia, fearing the impossible. That war of Quito Carnival was a war against regime change. Because you had a socialist MPLR that was in power in Angola, it has to be removed by force so that imperialists must have a foothold in Southern Africa. When we talk about that today, everybody says we're imagining this thing called regime change. Regime change is about removing legitimate governments from power and replace them with pliant governments which comply and protects the interests of the Western powers. Now, it's not new. When we talk of that Battle of Quito Carnival Sustenji, we're talking about a war against regime change. MPLA had to remove. If you talk of Renamo in Mozambique, it's a war about regime change. You have examples in Southern Africa. You don't need to go to the Rose Revolution in Georgia or the Pink Revolution in Ukraine or the Arab Springs. We have examples in our region. And the Cuban people contributed us in saving us from some of these efforts where an evil army of apartheid was defeated. In this act, Fidel not only reached Cuba and their sovereignty, sparing neither life nor limb of Cuban troops for the freedom of Angola and ultimately the freedom of Namibia and South Africa, but Fidel took personal command of the Cuban trip in his own words. This is what he had to say about that. In this action, the revolution put everything at stake. It put its own existence at stake. We even ran the risk of weakening our defenses, and we did so. Because the way we saw it, that problem had to be solved. Simply put, South Africa had to be prevented from invading Angola. That's what drove the Cuban people to send not only messages of solidarity, they came to Angola to defend and ensure that Angola's freedom is defended and Namibia and South Africa are free. And therefore, when we have this memorial service, we're not having this memorial service because it is a night to have. We owe it to ourselves and to the people of Cuba. Such as those who are motivated by human solidarity and the sovereignty, freedom, and humanity of others. Fidel fully understood that, as he said, apartheid is capitalism and imperialism in its fascist form and involves the idea of superior and inferior races. Simple description of apartheid. It is imperialism and it's capitalism and imperialism in its fascist form. That's what apartheid is. When it comes back disguised in blue t-shirts, it has not changed. It is the same. It is the same capitalism and imperialism in fascist form. You know, we are having an office here in Johannesburg. It's now governed by the opposition. We battle to get water here. Water gets locked from time to time. Early taste of what it is. You know, Sister Angie, when you gave us basic lessons, you told us that the state emerges from society It elevates itself above society and coheres society. Basics. You taught that as my teacher, eh? And you see that in practice, comrade, when you switch off water, when you actually put money above humanity. That's what you see. And you use the state to coerce society. Now, superiority and inferiority. Yesterday, I called my man a general. I called him general because he has given himself the right to command ANC forces. And he thinks that we will ever allow our forces to be commanded by enemy generals. It is not going to happen, comrade. We are going to engage ourselves. We are going to go through painful processes, but it will be our processes. We are not going to surrender our forces to be commanded by army generals. It's never done. Now, this was the experience not foreign to him, as he would have seen it in his motherland, Cuba, before the revolution. As such, we stand here today as a proud and free people. That's one of the best gifts. You know, when people ask, what has the ANC done? The most important thing that the ANC has done is to make us a proud and a free people. Everything else follows. Everything else follows. We are a proud and a free people. Fidel Castro, the voice of leadership and impulse to the revolution, the voice that consistently set the tone in how we should understand and confront the challenges we face in our world today. In 1963, he had this to say: the duty of revolutionaries, especially at this moment, is to know how to recognize and how to take advantage of the changes in the correlation of forces that have taken place in the world. So to understand that these changes facilitate the people's struggle. The duty of revolutionaries is not to wait for a change in the correlation of forces to produce a miracle of social revolution, but to take advantage of everything that is favorable to the revolution movement and make a revolution. So we're not going to sit somewhere else and wait for delivery to change our lives. We must make revolution happen. It means every South African must stand up and contribute to changing one's life. I think we coined a very wrong term, Sosngosazana, by using the term delivery. Delivery implies that somebody waits and somebody else delivers. That's not how a revolution is made. It means we must change from creating a passive nation and create an active nation. A nation that is part of effecting changes in society. If we can succeed in doing that, half of our problem will be resolved. If we don't succeed, comrade, we are going to confront a situation where we must respond to the demand for free this, free that, free Y, free Z. And if we do that, we are going to collapse the country and collapse the revolution, because we are not systematic and planning, and society is involving in changing its life. You know, when I talked about the university problems, it's called #fees must fall. I said it's a crisis of success. We're facing a crisis of our own success. One of the things that we are nudged by the Constitution to do is to give access to South Africans to education and higher education. Because we're doing that, our university infrastructure can carry about 500,000 students. It is now carrying close to 1 million. Because of that success, new pressure points will emerge. At a point, the pressure point was access. Now is to access that education. Therefore, we cannot be enemies of the fight for free education. We must say, okay, let's start with the poor and the working class, but the call is for us to facilitate ease to access education. Now, what therefore stands before us today is to make that revolution, to draw from the lesson placed before us by El Commandant Fidel Castro, Warus. Such a possibility not only stands in our face, it stands before us, ever beckoning on us to be united, single-minded in our mission and responsibility to bring about a South Africa, Africa, and a world that is truly free, just, and human. It is after all this voice that cannot be silenced or stifled, a voice that would rather be propelled from its breast and fired by its heart, that tells us that the fact is, when men carry the same ideals in their hearts, nothing can isolate them. Now, if every time we debate everything in the movement, we lose sight of the reality that we are carrying the same ideals in our hearts, and then get detracted to think that because we agree on this item and that item, therefore we are different. We are not different. We are driven by the same ideal in our hearts. Neither prison walls nor a sort of symmetries, for a single memory, a single spirit, a single idea, a single conscience, a single dignity will sustain them all. If there is commonality of purpose, we understand where we want to go, nothing will stop us. But if every time there's a distraction, we remove our eyes from the ball, we are not going to succeed, comrades. He was loyal to the revolution and his fellow comrades, as recounted by Comrade Che Guevara. He also demonstrated the utmost human expression even to his enemies, such that he wanted that Bazista soldiers who were injured in the battle should receive medical treatment. It is his humaneness in his character that, while honoring his fallen comrade, he harbored no bitterness or hatred for his enemies. For my dead comrades, that's what he said, I claim no vengeance. Since their lives were priceless, the murderers could not pay for them, even with their own lives. It is not by blood that we may redeem the lives of those who died for their country. The happiness of their people is the only tribute worth of them. What is more, my comrades are neither dead nor forgotten. They live today more than ever, and their murderers will view with dismay the victorious spirit of their ideas rise from their corpses. Let the apostles speak for me. There is a limit to the tears we can shed at the graveside of the dead. Such limit is infinite. Love for the homeland and its glory, a love that never falters, loses hope, nor grows dim. For the graves of the martyrs are the highest altars of the reverence. The graves of the martyrs are the highest altars of our reverence. This is why we love Fidel. I say we love Fidel because to us, those who seek and fight for better humanity, that voice continues to reject all attempts to stifle it. The name Fidel Castro, a name has inspired millions of generations in our country and globe. As former President Oliver Tambo intimated at the opening session of the 6th Conference of the Heads of States and Government of the Non-Allied Movement in Havana in 1979. This is what Tambo had to say. An outstanding leader whose name has become a household name, certainly among peoples who are struggling against imperialism, colonialism, and all these vices. Certainly among the people who, like the Cuban people, are conducting armed struggle for the liberation of their countries and their peoples. We have always been inspired by the mere mention of this name. There could be no doubt that President Fidel Castro is an idol of the young people of this world, a leader who is honored not only in his own land, but in other lands as well. That is what Oliver Tambo, the president of the African National Congress, said in 1979. We in South Africa and Southern Africa, we as members of the liberation movement would like today to salute this hero of the liberation struggle, this hero of the people. That is the message that came from Oliver Tambo is relevant today. I think the most important thing is that he has outlived the hostility of the US regime and witnessed the beginning and the process of normalization of the diplomatic relations between Cuba and the United States. Now, comrades, what is important is that freedom pangs grown in the different corners of the globe. Justice cries on the doorstep of our world. Human solidarity ever more beacons. Humanity yearns to be. Imperialism is not dead. Therefore, Fidel Castro lives on because the fight against imperialism must continue. Amanda.
Jabulani nonke makomanda jabulani nonke hauswege jabulani nonke makomanda jabulani nonke hauswege tina sikia ngale mota sishaya ngebazoka hauswege tina siyashela ngale mota sishaya ngebhazoka hauswege jabulani nonke magerila jabulani nonke hauswege jabulani nonke makomanda jabulani
Well, a very good afternoon. Those were live proceedings from the Johannesburg City Hall at, of course, the memorial service of the late Cuban revolutionary leader Fidel Castro, who passed away last week at the age of 90. The memorial service was organized by the ANC, its alliance partners, namely the SACP, SANCO, COSATU, the ANC veterans, just to mention a few. Dr. Dlamini-Zuma lauded him for making sure that Africa as a whole was free from colonial imperialist rule. She said that the Cubans contributed with their blood to our liberation. She said that we cannot and shouldn't forget that we live in a democratic South Africa because of people like Fidel Castro, who didn't expect anything in return for his tireless efforts. We saw the likes of David Mahlobo, the State Security Minister, Soli Mapaila of the SACP, Max Sisulu for the veterans, Tenjiwe Mtinzo, the former ambassador to Cuba, in attendance, and Stumo Dlamini from COSATU, and the ANC Secretary General Gwedimandashe, the keynote speaker there, who said Fidel was a selfless leader who stood for what he believed in, hence he was feared by some. He also added that as a society, we shouldn't be seduced by imperialism. They all paid their final respects to Ikawe Lamakawe, a hero among heroes. The group had chanted struggle songs and slogans, sang and danced in remembrance of the late revolutionary leader. I just want to give you a quick quote on President Jacob Zuma's moving tribute on the passing of Fidel Castro. He says here that the passing of Comrade Fidel is a painful loss for the South African people. He stood with us in solidarity, supporting our struggle, including the international campaign to isolate the apartheid regime. We knew that we could rely only on Cuba, a trusted friend and ally of the oppressed. Significantly, the deep and undying special relationship between Cuba and South Africa was cemented by the blood of heroic soldiers who paid the supreme sacrifice for their belief in anti-imperialism, freedom as well as justice. Now, it is understood that over 4,600 Cuban soldiers were killed in the time that Fidel Castro sent his troops to assist in the African wars. Let's take a quick look now at the news.